It's the biggest vaccination campaign in history. Almost 2 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccine have been administered worldwide to date. But is it enough to wipe out SARS-CoV-2? The virus keeps mutating, and each change makes it harder to control. 4 major new variants have already been identified: Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta. But there are more letters in the Greek alphabet. And researchers worry they'll soon have to use them for new COVID variants. Many areas of the world are still waiting for their share of the vaccine supply, giving the virus a fertile breeding ground for fresh mutations and new outbreaks in the coronavirus pandemic.
Welcome to our COVID-19 special. I'm Monica Jones. Good to have you with us. Now, let's just hear that again. Almost 2 billion shots worldwide. That's quite an achievement. But of course, those shots are not evenly spread across all continents. In terms of sheer numbers, North America and Europe managed about 370 million shots each. South America, with COVID-stricken countries like Brazil, has a lot of catching up to do. Africa and its more than 1.3 billion people only received 34 million doses so far, while Asia is storming ahead with more than 1 billion shots. But that doesn't mean Asia is fully vaccinated, far from it. There are huge gaps, like in Vietnam, a country that has long been praised for its response to the pandemic. Now it is faced with new outbreaks and a new variant.
The discomforts of the pandemic, known to many around the world, are now common in Vietnam too. Authorities in Ho Chi Minh City are ramping up COVID-19 testing, first focusing on high-risk groups. Residents are on alert amid fast-rising case numbers. I'm more worried about the new virus variant. I have to wear a mask more often than before outside and also limit meeting others. Ho Chi Minh City has been partially shuttered, with many businesses closed and public gatherings restricted. Some residents find themselves behind quarantine cordons amid local outbreaks. Students are vacating their dormitories to make way for a new hospital in preparation for the worst. The last flights into Hanoi have landed. The busy international airport is closing for a week. The government had feared the country's outbreak was fueled by a new COVID mutant, but WHO researchers have confirmed that most cases here were caused by the Delta variant, a previously documented strain of the virus. Vietnam is in a race to vaccinate. So far, only about 1% of its population has been inoculated. Only weeks ago, Vietnam had achieved a month of zero community transmissions. Its strict arrival quarantine measures and fast lockdowns proved effective, but COVID-19 is finding cracks in even the most cautious countries.
So for more, let's bring in Professor Richard Neher from the Biozentrum, the Center for Molecular Life Science at the University of Basel in Switzerland. Let's clarify the situation in Vietnam, first of all. Is there a new variant? And if so, how worrying is it?
Yeah, so what we know from Vietnam at the moment is that they are observing the variant Delta, so the variant that caused the big outbreak in India. And some of the genomes they described over the last few days, they have in addition a deletion at position 144 of the spike protein. And that is a modification and mutation that we've seen previously, for example, in the variant Alpha, the one that originated in the UK. But that in itself is not really too worrying or concerning. We have seen this deletion at position 144 before.
All right, and mutations per se aren't that worrying either. As far as I know, they're normal because that is what viruses do in order to survive. So why all the fuss about new variants right now?
Yeah, so viruses, in particular RNA viruses, they mutate all the time. They have a fairly sloppy replication machinery. That means that their genomes change sort of step by step. But some of these, and actually a small fraction of these mutations, they allow the viruses to either evade existing immunity or sort of become more transmissible, more adapted to the human host, and thereby sort of cause new outbreaks and secondary waves, third waves, fourth waves in places that have already seen such sort of larger waves of COVID-19. And as such, modifications, adaptations of the virus to the new environment are, of course, concerning because it allows for resurgence of the pandemic.
Right, and that's why
this usually only. Yeah.
That is why it is so important for us to do sequencing in order to keep track of what kind of variant we're dealing with, so that we can hopefully respond. Do we actually have a chance to ever be ahead of the virus, or will we always lag behind?
Well, sequencing, as you just said, allows us to spot new variants early, sort of allows us to see how different variants that are circulating differ from each other. And the mutations that we observe in the genomes of these viruses through sequencing, they give us hints very early on how these viruses might behave. So, for example, if they have mutations in specific spots of the virus that the immune system is recognizing, that would be a cause for concern, because that might mean that the immune system is sort of less, protecting less well from this particular variant. With these very sort of intense sequencing and surveillance efforts that we have in place now, we do have a chance to get on top of this early and sort of at least see any changes in the viral population before they become common. And I think that is sort of a big advantage that we have now over what it used to be a few months ago even.
Okay, and of course the other weapon that we have, if you like, is a vaccine. This week we're closing in on 2 billion shots of COVID-19 vaccines worldwide, but we're light years away from global herd immunity, with a huge discrepancy between industrial and developing nations. How big is the danger that this discrepancy will create a strain that could eventually escape immunity?
Well, the important part here is that we have to bring case numbers down, because escape mutants can emerge both by infecting sort of vaccinated people or by people that have had a previous infection. And there are reasons to believe that a previous infection is not as protective as a vaccine, and that it is sort of more conducive to generate new variants and escape variants. So bringing case numbers down is really the thing that matters. And to do that, we need to bring vaccination to the entire globe.
And of course, there are different vaccines, and some vaccines are said to work better against certain variants than others. But vaccination is still key, because some people don't seem to trust vaccines anymore. What do you say?
Well, historically, vaccines have been, our most powerful tools against infectious disease, and I think we have every reason to expect that the same is going to be true here. And it is important to remember that vaccination elicits sort of multiple layers of immune protection, and most of what we're talking about here with variants are sort of antibody escape mutations, meaning specific aspects of the immune response might be less effective after that. But there's every reason to believe that in particular protections against severe disease remains robust and is not so susceptible to little changes by variants.
All right, Professor Richard Neher there from the Center for Molecular Life Science at the University of Basel in Switzerland. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, 1 year into the pandemic, there is already a variety of vaccines on the market, with more on the way. But questions still remain about the safety of vaccines for young and old alike. Our science correspondent Derek Williams takes a look at the AstraZeneca jab.
Why is the AstraZeneca vaccine apparently safe for older people?
First of all, I want to emphasize that the data shows that for the vast majority of people, the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine is both safe and reliable. But in extremely rare cases, it has also been linked to the development of potentially dangerous blood clots. There's been a scientific scramble to try to figure out exactly what's going on. And experts now think that in those rare individuals, substances produced by the immune system in response to the vaccine can also activate platelets in the blood, which leads to the clotting. Because it happens so rarely, the statistics aren't conclusive, but women under the age of 50 seem to be affected most often. That's led national health authorities in some countries with a range of vaccine options to begin recommending the AstraZeneca vaccine primarily to those over the age of 60, where links to clotting were not completely absent, but much, much more tenuous. It's pretty amazing, actually, that we discovered these needles in a haystack so quickly, and also that we already have a pretty good explanation for what might be causing them. I couldn't find any studies explaining in metabolic terms exactly why this particular side effect seems to impact older people less often than it does younger ones. But many experts think that the idea that the clotting is basically caused by an immune response, that could explain it. We know that as people age, their immune responses tend to dampen down. And in this particular case, that could be a good thing. And with all the other data we have about the AstraZeneca vaccine, showing it to be safe and effective, it remains a very powerful tool in our arsenal for protecting the elderly in particular, who are most at risk if they catch COVID-19, hence the recommendation that they continue to receive it.
Well, vaccination in some regions is advanced enough for them to open up again. In Riyadh, hundreds gathered last night for the first concert in the Saudi capital since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Live performances and a live audience, something to look forward to. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.